Om Shatagunam Vidyan Mananam Mananadapi Nidijasam Lakshagunam Anantam Nirvikalpakam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Hearing about Brahman is good. Taking teachings on Brahman is better. Better still is meditating directly upon Brahman. And best of all is that meditation in which all doubt about the nature of reality dies away forever. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Welcome everyone to our Satsang. I think it's probably the first one in some 3 weekends because we've been away to the mainland. And I feel like I'm just come back from the wars, as the saying goes, as seeing the different places holding the various karmas of human condition right now, and right on down to the growing tent cities in Portland, Oregon, that I was dreaming about just last night. And people in nursing homes and old folks' homes that I was visiting haunt my mind as I come back from that excursion and sit down happily to speak about higher and better things, which we like to try and share with the world. The Dharma is one word for it, or in Ramakrishna order, we specify it a little bit more and say the Jnana Yoga or the Jnanam, because these are the teachings that define us, which fulfill our lives. And unfortunately, and strangely enough, do not get aired enough or thought about enough by the human race, people of these times. They're pretty much the remedy for all ills, based upon the fact that if you can concentrate the mind on positive side of the mind's thoughts, that is the aklista vrittis rather than the klista vrittis, those that are free of negativities, then the mind tends to gravitate there as almost habitually. The way it formed a habit of negativity could also form a habit of positivity. And that's all up to the mind and the willpower of the one who uses the mind, which is what we're trying to attain here. I've often boiled it down to witness consciousness, or sakshi bhutam, not being so much embroiled in the phenomena of the world, but extracting oneself from that and knowing oneself as a witness. All things happen in nature, Arjuna, not in the Atman, as Krishna reminds Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. So wherever and whenever and however we can hear these teachings in the great scriptures of the world, or from a living guru, or even by reading the biographies and great stories of souls who have passed, who have had the experience of being a human being. Because I remember my dear friend Lex Hickson, and our founder, saying before he passed, he said, well, there are much better things to be than a human being. So that was another perspective that he gave us, probably based on the fact of the limitations that the human being is existing under. On the other hand, it provides a great challenge for us to break through those limitations and to be free, like a bird trying out its wings after having been caged for so long. And one need not wait for a post-mortem emancipation for that, as my teacher, Swami Sheshananda, used to say, but should look for that immediate freedom. And I was talking about that in the God blogs this last week, although I was late in putting them out because having had returned from that journey, that I didn't get the God blogs up until Thursday and Friday, but I hope you'll have time to look at them if you're intending to attend to them in about an hour and a half when we finish our morning satsang here. But since my absence from the screen, but my presence in the Portland ashram and in the retreat we had on the Annapurna Upanishad, section 2 and 3, the teachings were all about the Jivan Mukta, or the Jivan Mukti state. And those went very deep. We had a new chart on them, of course, as we were wont to do, and saw the tightrope walk of that great soul who gets beyond even the Turiya state, the fourth state, into Turiyatita, or Samavata, as Vishishta calls it, Satya Samanya. And then we came to know how deep consciousness is, or if you want to put it in that way, how high it is. It's got great depths and great heights, and all based upon vibrating spheres and high-minded thoughts. The soul can visit those realms and should visit those realms, even when it's caught here in the human context, in the river of time. As, again, our founder, Lex Hickson, used to say about some of his translations of the Ram Prasad poems, your life in the river of time is coming to an end. So it suggests that when you get out of the river of time, as Lord Buddha taught, as found in the Dhammapada, then you'll find yourself on the banks of this boundless ocean of consciousness. And having just had your experiences inside of it, are now more of a witness of it. And that's what we come to find out early in this life, if we're devotees or aspirants or seekers of truth, is that we find that unlike all other beings around us, we've been given this great boon to withdraw from unconscious participation and be more of a aware witness of phenomena as it goes by, which comes in very handy, as we know, in a world like this, and very helpful to myself as I was just traveling. And we'll have to go traveling again in a few months to return to those same areas. So we try and bring spirituality with us everywhere we go, using the mantra. Yesterday I got an email from a student with 10 questions about the mantra. So I put 10 answers and sent it back to her. How valuable it is and how powerful it is, and how undiscovered it is. And we're soon to give a seminar on the fire of yoga, which is another beautiful statement that comes out of the mind of Swami Vivekananda, and how he could go anywhere and do anything if he was invested with the power of the fire of yoga. So we have a lot of key words and key phrases in Vedanta that are cropping up again in this age. We have to do more than just hear them, but we'll have to actually put them into practice and utilize them for the higher good of all living beings, as the Upanishads say. So our studies are important for that. Our meditation is important for that. And also, as given by Swami Vivekananda, bringing everything full circle back into life is extremely important now. So karma yoga takes on a very important aspect of the four yoga. And so that we're able to cause some positive things to happen in the world, open some doors, some nadis, or some inward doorways. That was one of the questions asked yesterday about the mantra. How does it open doors? And my answer was, these doors were made to be opened by the mantra. So you're looking at it kind of the opposite way when you think about, oh, I have to go open some door that's been closed for ages. These doors were actually fabricated to open to the sound of the words that you utter. And that's their purpose. It's not that there's a big impediment there or obstacle. It's just waiting to hear that, sort of like the old open sesame, Aladdin and the thieves and all of that. If you just know the right mantra and you say it at the right time, then those doors open at your command. And you can journey inward then along these, what the yogis call the nadis, and have experiences that are more conscious, including your dreams, like mine last night. So you can bring sustenance and succor to those beings who are locked behind those doors in darkness. And it was a great mission of Swami Vivekananda to make that a part of the new Vedanta or Neo-Vedanta of waking up. First, of course, we have to make sure our eyes are wide open and our minds are balanced and our energy is flowing. Apyayantu mamangani vak pranas chakshu shrotra matra balam indriyani cha sarvani, as the Upanishads tell us in the peace chants, which we are uttering today because we'll go tonight to a Buddhist temple and say some prayers and wave some incense in front of the image of Thich Nhat Hanh, who is being remembered tonight at the Hangwan Ji mission. So we're going to go down there and burn some incense and say some mantras for him, because too often the media gets on the trail of warmongers and brings the wrong things forward to contemplate wars and with beings who they consider to be so great and powerful. Then they forget about the peacemakers, and because they're always so quiet and working behind the scenes. So it's good that we remember these beings who are truly great, as we do in the SRV association when we think about Sri Ramakrishna and his direct disciples. What a great explosion, inner or implosion they caused and are causing even today as time, the river of time flows on, and how we should honor them and reverence them. That makes that doorway a two-way avenue. It opens in and out, and good energy can travel both directions on this awakened prana, in this awakened mind. And we can experience that ocean of awareness that's boundless and be transported and enter into it each day of our own will. So maybe you have been reading about those kinds of beings who have written the Upanishads called rishis, or the great avatars like Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita and Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel. And you have some questions for satsang, which is really what it should be more about. So I hope now I've been away from my satsang seat here, as far as in Hawaii, as we had a couple satsangs in Portland at the ashram, and some satsangs at the retreat, and across the river in Washington. So maybe you've had some questions that have come up, or some things you can share. I know at least one of you does, because I heard so in an email yesterday. So I'll open the floor to those insights and remarks and questions. Yes, Akshaya.
There. In the Viveka Chudamani, I keep restarting it, trying to really find deeper meaning. And this particular statement really puzzled me. It's so powerful, but it's it doesn't seem to have a solution to it. Study of the scriptures is fruitless as long as Brahman has not been experienced. And where Brahman has been experienced, it is useless to read the scriptures. So I get that part. But why is it expressed that way, that study of the scriptures is fruitless? And like what is meant by the experience of Brahman? Does that have to be samadhi, or can you answer that?
Right. Of course, if you're reading Shankara, you're reading at a very high level of philosophy already, because he's pretty much ensconced in the Advaitic perspective. He is, you've got Ramanuj and you've got Madhva, who represent qualified non-dualism and dualism in India. Madhva being, standing up for dualism, and Ramanuj standing up for qualified non-dualism. But Shankara is known as the third one of those great souls, who is representative of the pillars of non-dual reality, or Advaita Vedanta. So you're already reading at a very high level when you're reading of his scriptures, and you have to sort of shift your consciousness to that level, because he may throw some rather offhanded sounding things like that at you from a state of high realization that he's reached. But maybe come down a little bit to the qualified level of that Ramanuja represents to explain it more. You could say that if you were living amidst thousands of Brahmin priests who had forgotten the message of the Upanishads and how to give it to the people in a fallen era like that, because Shankara lived 700 AD or so. So in a kind of in India, where Buddhism had come and gone, Vedanta, the early Vedanta had come and gone, and then Shankara and his teachers were trying to sort of resurrect this Advaita Vedanta and bring it back. Then you had Brahmin priests that were reciting scriptures by rote and for money, as priestcraft usually does in all religions. And so you would probably look at those beings and say, well, recitation of scripture is fruitless unless you've experienced Brahman. It's like Sri Ramakrishna saying, somebody can come up to you and say, oh, I hear you're going to Calcutta, and I can tell you all about Calcutta because I've studied it on a map. So this man has never been to Calcutta, you see, and he's wanting to act as your guide. So he's an example of a person who has studied the scriptures. I've heard about Brahman, as we just chanted, Shata Gunam Vidyan Manana Mananadapi, but he's not a very good example of a person who's actually had the taste of it yet. Some have never heard of milk, some have heard of it, never tasted it, others have actually tasted it. But fortunate is that one who, has a glass full, as it were, and can drink it and get nutrition from it. So that's probably partially where that statement may be coming from. Also to set it off against each other, that if you do, as Sri Ramakrishna said, what use is the ghat, the pool of water, when there's flood all around. So it rained so hard, for a while that everything just turned to water. And now, you used to have to take a river to get to the ocean, but now you just take a boat and sail straight across the land. You can get there without the twists and turns of a river. So he's using that as the expression of how futile it is to talk to the realized soul about Brahman. Tell him, here, read the scripture. Isn't this beautiful? But he's living in it, you see. So maybe those two perspectives will help that. Unless you have a further question on it, it just puts it into perspective as a very good sloka to contemplate like that. Again, we're borrowing from souls who came before Shankara, and then Sri Ramakrishna, who's most current on the scene, to bring understanding to a saying like that. So there again, we want to make sure our minds can go both directions after the door is open. It's very interesting you bring that up, because when you ask a question, you're knocking at a door, and when the door is open, the question is answered, and then the teachings go in and out, and they have to flow both ways, and you have to be that flexible to be able to catch the innuendos of the answer. And some people, my teacher was very good at that. You'd ask him a question and he'd just start talking about something totally unrelated. You said, what happened to my question? And it was like he was trying to get you to think differently. We figured out finally later, that you're coming from this type of questioning that, say, the Western intellectual people are used to. That really doesn't get to the point of things at all. It just gives you an answer that you want to hear, that may be satisfying to you for a little while, but it doesn't really get to the issue and unwrap the problem. So that's why he would start to lead you in different directions with these, with his unique answer. Maybe he'd come back later and return more towards, after he had opened up the avenues of your thinking a little bit so you could hear more, he could return and give you an answer that was more pat and determined. So anyway, that's the way we want to try and look at these scriptures. Shankara as being actually not so ancient compared to the Upanishads. There's another element to your question there. I can think, while someone else is thinking of a question, that Brahman is futile, that it's futile to read the scriptures, if Brahman's already realized, and reverse to that is that maybe it seems a little bit contradictory or contrary, because you're reading the scriptures so that you can get experience of Brahman. Maybe that's another angle that you can look at it from. So it kind of leaves you in a lurch. Say, well, I'm supposed to put the scriptures down because I haven't experienced Brahman yet. But to study the scriptures is part of the path towards experiencing Brahman. So it's like the old problem with book learning. And sometimes people will misinterpret Sri Ramakrishna's gospel that way when he says, book learning is a negative thing. So he's talking about that kind of book learning that relies only on the scriptures and doesn't seek for direct spiritual experience after, which is why this, hearing the truth, contemplating it and realizing it, and then bringing it back full measure. Sometimes that's called the three proofs of truth, or the three great truths. So you have Guru Anushasanana, you get a teacher, and then Vidya Shastra, you hear him talk about the Shastras and the wisdom in them. And then Nididhyasana, you get the experience of it yourself. So probably what's being said there is that, there are people who have wandered off with a book and read it, put it down, said I've read it, and then really never got any experience from it, or never asked a guru what it meant. See, so there's a lot of other things you can do inside of the tradition that can ensure you the fact that you've heard the truth and that you understand the truth and that now it's yours. And then you can put it into practice or put it into action. Sakshatkara, that's called. So there's a fourth level of Manana, Shravana, and Nididhyasana. Manana, Shravana means to hear. Manana means to roll it around your mind and then get your own experience of it. So you're supposed to come back from all of that with this fourth aspect of working it into your life, being able to work it into others' lives. Like Shankara could, even at 12 years old, he was teaching graybeards. So if you have that, that ability, then of course you can be very effective in the world of philosophy and destroy a lot of unnecessary, unreal ignorance in people's minds, and let, open it up and let them soar with the great swan. What is your practice, sir? They asked our founder, Lex Sixon, at the end of his life. My practice is called soaring with the great swan, he said. And we know the great swan's the Paramahamsa, Sri Ramakrishna. And so even with all his practices in different other religions, right up to the end, Sri Ramakrishna was always soaring with the great swan, with Sri Ramakrishna. So read the scripture, get a little taste of Brahman, and then do your manana, and then do your meditations, and then that experience will come through. Is another way of saying that. Don't just read it and put it down. Each of those slokas are powerful words, and those words are, again, as I said, meant to break down doorways or blockages in the mind.
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste, everyone.
Hey, Imre, we can't see you. Just we can't see you, but we can hear you.
I'm sorry. It's my camera. I tried to restart the system, but it's still not working. I refreshed the Windows in the morning, and it hasn't been working properly since then. In the break, I will try to do something again.
Well, you're a voice without a form. That's how Vivekananda liked to be.
I do have questions, and originally I planned to ask about the Chitta Bhasha, simply the term, but as you were explaining just previously on Shankara, another question popped up, which is can we say, so could you shed light upon the relationship between Shakti, Mahashakti, and emanation? Can we say that the emanation is Shakti herself? That's my current question, or the actual question. And the other question would be, could you just clarify a little bit about the expression itself, so the word Chitta Bhasha, as I was studying in the Footfalls, this wonderful chart on the reflection of Brahman in the cosmos, and how so what the word means, and also this relationship with Shakti and emanation. It would be really great to hear a little bit.
Well, I was just reading yesterday, I think, some of the teachings of Pipalada, who is a very ancient rishi. And he was saying, just like the rays of the sun unite with the sun at the time of sunset, when darkness comes, just like that, this power of emanation unites with Brahman at the end of a cosmic cycle. So Divine Mother even says that in the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. She says, when Pralaya comes and everything melts away, I myself melt away into Brahman. So all sentient beings with their intelligence, they should have that intelligence open and on fire, like the burning pillar, like darkness cannot get in, you see, so cannot penetrate. So in that way, this following the light, and your questions are very related. The emanation with the Chitta Bhasha could very easily be aligned with one another. So the light that comes off of the word or off of the ocean of Brahman, if you want to leave out that matrix, which is probably not a good idea to do, but whatever the case, the light that shines off of pure conscious awareness extends itself through the word and down to the worlds, to form the worlds, and the people then attend upon the worlds with their own intelligence, with their own power of sankalpa. So just by a matter of course, the light shines through the many colored glasses of the dome of the mind, of the cosmic mind, and turns into all these worlds. And when all these worlds are ready, which is even true of this planet Earth, it had a long time for it to get ready so that there would be some land here and not just water. And this is where time really moves slowly. But in all worlds, it's the same. It takes a while for worlds to form out of that light. And then when they're ready, consciousness will assume forms and visit those worlds. It's all rather dreamlike, as it's described in India, most Indian philosophies, Tantra and so forth. And Chittavasa is the way in which Vedanta would describe it. But emanation from the source would be a more tantric way of describing it, because they're looking at the Divine Mother as Shakti, as the dynamic power of Lord Shiva, and how she emanates and then creates and oversees all the worlds and all the beings in it. And also, as Father of Yoga says at the end of the Yoga Sutras, strips name and form away from the picture, that is the pictures that are in the mind, and returns the soul to its source. A very beautiful couple of slokas in the Yoga Sutras about her. She's called Chitti Shakti. So she's aware of and in operation of the progenitress of, the propitiator of, and the caretaker of all the light that shines off of Brahman and where it goes. Otherwise, of course, it just exists on its own in its own pure essence before any matrix gets a hold of it. It just shines of its own nature, its own abundance, limitless, boundless, and with the power to dissolve everything that moves towards it or merges into it, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. Everything is soluble into Brahman. But those things that are outward moving or outward going, I mean, we talk about that usually in terms of the five senses down here, but even in terms of higher chakras, is everything is moving down the spectrum of spiritual vortexes or centers, and the vibration is becoming more and more solid or more and more gross. Then that they're following that light of the Shakti that's guiding them into those particular realms. So, I mean, that was one of the God blogs I put up yesterday that we can talk about in a little while. You know, is does she rise or is she already there? I think was the subtitle. So people talking about the rising of Kundalini Shakti, and I've always thought, well, yeah, you can say that. It feels like that to the individual who's awakening, but the real thing is that they're just awakening to the fact that she's already there when they arrive, when they're ready to arrive. They'll come upon her and go, oh, how amazing, you know, you're rising in me. And she'll look back at them and say, well, you just rose to me because I'm everywhere. And you know, the sign on the fence, I was walking along a country road to get to retreats, and I made up a Zen koan. This was years ago. And the first line of it was, sign on the fence says no trespassing. Too late. I'm already everywhere. So it's like that. Your light, if you're following the Mother Shakti, she's everywhere and you're everywhere with her. But you have to become aware of that fact and go willingly, and let go willingly too when the time comes, so that you can call yourself her son or her daughter and move fluidly, with that kind of speed that she possesses, instead of the ponderous, slow, weighty way of taking birth and living and passing, say, with only the physical worlds as your reality, or the physical body as yourself. You have to let go of those kinds of concepts and really give yourself into this mercurial speed that she has, that she flows with. And in that way, then you'll begin to understand what Chittabhasa really means, is that, you know, the light of Brahman is in everything and everywhere. And it's stable and stationary, but it moves through her. She takes on the sense of movement and expansion, contraction, and so forth. All those things belong to that light. And if you identify with the owner of that light, then you can move in that fashion, like into meditation and samadhi, like Sri Ramakrishna did. He would give himself entirely to her and let her take his mind and into a lofty place. But you see, most people maybe sit down in meditation and say, I'm going to meditate. So maybe they've already stopped all of that spontaneity that she has by saying I, or I will, or I'm doing, or I'm meditating, rather than just sitting and throwing yourself into that the idea of all pervasiveness. And of course, this is, if you were talking about Chittabhasa, the light of Brahman, how it expresses as it trickles down and out from the cosmic mind or from the word. This is why on that chart you're studying footfalls, it's very well proportioned there with a few of the major cosmic principles, and how, again, mostly in sets of fives, they come down and out. And I think the plus to the Vedantic way of looking at that is that you keep Brahman in mind when you think of Chittabhasa. But if you're going to think about something else, like, say, Leela or evolution, then philosophically or cosmologically speaking, you run the risk of forgetting that all of that is actually Brahman. And then, of course, people do forget that it's all Brahman, and they begin to look at just the steps or just the elements. Then you have to, after a while, have someone come along and say, no, here's how this connects. Because people lose the connections first, and then they start focusing on the individual things. I mean, just look at all of our apara vidya here. You can take water and, you can be a biologist, or you can take water and you can be an aquamarine scientist, or you can take water and you can go on a hike. I mean, how many different things can you take any element or any bit of knowledge and split it into so many different avenues, and then at the same time forgetting the wholeness of it, the indivisibility of it, the homogeneity of it. And so that's, in philosophy, that would, of course, be the advaita of the whole thing, to be that you're very much concentrating on keeping that first and foremost while you look at all of the emanations. In this case, emanation would be all the ways in which her rays of wisdom shine into the various worlds, lokas, chakras, and so forth. One ray of wisdom from the Divine Mother stuns 1,000 scholars, Sri Ramakrishna used to say. So if it stuns scholars, just one ray, you can see how the masterful philosopher, the realized soul, is going to have to keep the third eye open when he or she gazes upon that mass of light that comes off of Brahman through the Mahashakti, and what it does, all its amazing effects and manifestations of it, without forgetting that the sources of things. Because then if you forget the sources of things, the connections get forgotten. And then someone has to come along at the later age and say, well, you're caught in evolution here, but there's this word I want to introduce to you called involution. And in order to get on the path of involution and get out of suffering, then you're going to have to make these certain connections again that you've lost in your mind. So that's what we're going to be studying tomorrow's class, which is, I think, like the 7th or 8th class in that series of Mana Prana Sambandha, how to connect the living prana to the illumined mind. Because those connections have been forgotten. Yes?
Namaste, sorry for interjecting.
It's all right.
I just wanted to ask, and because it was so much so much apropos to what you were saying, that of this quote that paraphrasing, that no more births and deaths from me anymore, only emanations from the Divine Mother. If you know which quote I'm trying to quote here, I can't quite say right now who I'm quoting it from. It's been repeated so many times. It just came in my mind when you were saying these things, that this quote, the meaning of this quote, in one way, of course, teachings can be explained. It has many different facets for understanding a particular teaching, but is it okay to come back to the earth if it's from the emanation of the Divine Mother? Is this how it could be understood, that if this willingness is like fortified or confirmed, that it's okay to return to earth, or if it, for these sages, it's not really a question, or it's not in their perception that it's coming back, it's only an emanation, or how would you understand this properly?
Right, you're quoting from one of Ram Prasad's songs, like Sixon's translations, which one of the lines says, "No more birth in the womb of matter for me, only emanation from my Divine Mother." So they can come to earth then, and since they know themselves to be other than the body, or that you could say they know that they have a subtle body, or they have a witness body, and they've perfected that. That perfected it means that they can live in it. It's not alien to them like to other people. You could talk about other bodies to most people on earth, and they wouldn't know what the hell you're talking about. So these beings know about their inner sheaths, or their shariras, or their upadhis, or their koshas, and how they align with various worlds, inner worlds, so they can move amongst them. But in that same collection of poems, Ram Prasad says, don't you know that everyone's lost here? everyone lives in pallid imitation of everyone else. So he's also warning at the same time, or you could say, causing a distinction to be made between those beings who identify with the earth and just live in pallid imitation of their ancestors again and again, living those mewing like cats in their corners, as Swami Vivekananda used to say, living their great little studies of life from lifetime to lifetime. So living in that kind of narrowness of perspective without any of this knowledge dawning upon them ever. Sri Ramakrishna said humorously once, they don't even think of God even by accident. So and so what do you expect that there's such a thing as atheism comes along and so forth? So, and people don't believe anymore. But yes, everyone's living in pallid imitation of everyone else. So that's not the way to emanate. A person who would emanate would be something different than someone who would evolve. You could put evolution on one side of the spectrum and emanation on the other, and pair them off against each other and see how the consciousness that's coming down the evolutionary ladder has forgotten its source, or very soon forgets its source, and identifies completely with every little aspect of evolution until finally it forms itself a physical body that it thinks is its true nature, it thinks it's its true self. Somebody coming down a ray of light, consciousness gets identified with a ray of light and comes to earth, sees the earth as something different than itself, sees the body as something it's going to have to form and get into and express through. Do you understand what I'm saying there? So, consciousness as it identifies with the idea of evolution in a line from inward out, and consciousness as it would identify with a ray of mother's wisdom from inside down or out, is an entirely different thing. And so that's the difference between a conscious birth and an unconscious birth. And we know from the teachings of particularly Tibetan Buddhism and so forth, that the unconscious births are many, and that the goal, or you might say the penultimate goal there, is to have your first conscious death. For a person who has understood Chittabhasa or Divine Mother wisdom or emanation, or maybe only believes in evolution and doesn't know that the soul came from somewhere, doesn't even know that there is a soul yet, thinks the body is that. So you can see how much has to be reversed and turned around in order to have that conscious death and conscious exit. Because as I was just saying, people ought to said, when night time comes, all the rays of the sun all of a sudden disappear. Where do they go to? And they identify back with the sun itself. So when death comes, then all souls on earth, and there's going to be some few rare souls that take that as the signal to identify again with the sun, with the ocean of light. And so it's easy for them to drop all these connections. They won't even have to labor up the ladder of involution to do that. They'll do it as a matter of spontaneity, immediacy. Some beings will have to, meditate, dissolve, and so forth. Maybe they'll want to do that early, but when it comes down to the withdrawal of name and form and time and space from the mind's thinking process, and the mind's got to go empty to do that, then they'll be able to, like a ray of sun returning to the body of the sun, do it immediately. And that's this teaching about spontaneity and swiftness of mother wisdom, how immediate it is. So possibly the risk in that, by the nature of Bobby Nye's question there, is that maybe we want to make some sort of concession for all of this. It's all right to come to Earth. Oh yes, we're fine here. See, so that's the problem and the risk. The Advaita would tell you, you never came here in the first place. This isn't a place to come. There is no place outside of Brahman. So you tripped up on the very first step of the ladder of involution. Or when you took on a body and identified with your parents and the 5 elements, the 5 senses, and formed a body. That should have all been done consciously by a clear mind. Chid abhasa, the reflection from chid, from consciousness, not from some lower source. So you should be able to attach and detach at will in that sort of fashion. You don't need to make concessions or make excuses for being in the body or for leaving it. You just need to know that thou art. You are that divine mother emanation. You yourself are that ray of wisdom. There's nothing better around you that could step into that role except you. You are that. Trees, animals, and so forth, or even worldly people aren't going to be able to do it. So you begin looking at yourself as one of those rays of wisdom. O meditator, become the goddess. You are her essence. He sings in another song. O meditator, become the goddess. You are her essence. Everyone repeat that with me. O meditator, become the goddess. You are her essence. O meditator, become the goddess. You are her essence. O meditator, become the goddess. You are her essence.
3 minutes.
Well, that's as good an English mantra as any, and it's certainly worth repeating every time you sit to meditate. So you remind yourself of the source and that you are that source, because studying things from distance, you put your liberation off to a future date, and you tend to put things into your way that don't necessarily have to be there. Then you have to break through them later when they crystallize in your mind. So keep the whole thing fluid and flowing, like the prana. We'll be looking at that at tomorrow's class again, putting a exclamation point on the teachings of prana, how to purify it, how to raise it, how to make it flow, and then how to connect it to the illumined mind. And this isn't something you're going to see happen with your physical eyes. You're going to make it happen inside of you with your thinking process, with your illumined thinking process, and then feel it when it finally dawns upon you as realization and insight. And then bask in it daily.
Babaji,
Yes.
Not an additional, but just something you said a few weeks ago is just so apropos of so much of today's satsang. You were referencing Swami Vivekananda's statements that religion is the manifestation of spirituality already in the person, or illumination already in the person. And education is the manifestation of the knowledge that already exists within. And so the next one, your addition was prana is the manifestation of the Divine Mother already present within us, each of us. And anyway, I just wanted to shout that one out because it's a wonderful meditation.
Yes, and that chart we're studying for the last couple months in the Sunday classes, the Mana Prana Sambandha, has 3 or 4 really choice quotes on the prana on it. So if you look it up in Footfalls, you can get a good 4-sided view, or many-sided view of prana and how important it is. Sometimes you'll read about prana in the scriptures, and in the early scriptures, it'll almost make it sound like it is Brahman. That's how close it is to the source. But of course, it moves. Brahman doesn't. It waxes and wanes. Brahman doesn't. So there are some things that you'll have to know about Brahman to separate it from that. But nevertheless, it's that Garuda bird. It's that great Garuda bird that Vishnu rides in the Itihasa and the stories of India whenever he goes anywhere. So he gets on that prana and goes to any world or any place he wants immediately. And so that with that symbology, we're to think that prana should be that flowing and multidimensional at many different levels for us. And we should be able to access that when we work at our desk or when we sit to meditate and look inward. Then that prana should be this flowing river of Shakti, or flowing river of pure energy flowing to Shakti, which then merges into Brahman. So may good betide all, may love come into all, may all see the face of truth, and may all be fortified by the armor of love. Oh, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So I hope to see you then in an hour for those 4 God blogs. If you can give them a quick run your eyes over them in your mind, we'll have some good things to talk about. Or otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully at class. Hari Om.